There's an update. Oh, he's caught 3. He just had a 17-yard long catch.
No, so these people are losing their minds over 17 yards.
He's caught 3 of 6 for 50, and he just had a 17-yard.
Jordan Howard is 22 yards.
Yes, that's what I said.
Nice. Your boy, Jordan Howard.
Mm-hmm. What the fuck is a Patrick Ricard?
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Don't care. I'm a Patrick.
Sounds like a fullback.
Patrick Ricard. He has a catch for 6 yards. So it could be a fullback.
It sounds like a fullback. He sounds like a fullback name.
Come on, Gus Edwards, get in there. Hi, Jackie.
Wait, where are you?
In the studio.
Oh, right, it's green screen.
Hi, babe.
I saw you guys on the monitor. Hey.
What's
How
up?
are you?
What up, motherfucker?
I brought you donuts.
I'm on a diet now, so I moved them promptly.
I'm sorry. You're on a diet on a Sunday? That's got to be cheat day.
I just started, like, yesterday.
Well, you decided to start your diet. Why did you start it? Why not on a Monday?
I'm going to get fucking diabetes if I don't clean up my shit.
I mean,
I went to the boot camp, and now I can't move. I'm, like, so
what
sore.
what boot camp?
One by my house.
Like a workout boot camp.
Mm.
I can't walk.
You know, like the good thing about diabetes though is that you get one of those fucking scooters.
We're live. How exciting.
So. Sounds like we got beamed in.
It did sound, we had some alien sounds coming in our ears. Liz.
To be honest, that was just your green juice.
Oh, man. That's been moving.
I can hear Harmon's tummy from over here.
That's already moved out to the next location.
But has it been as explosive as Nick Chubb? Because the man has been on fire, and it hasn't been OBJ despite Baker Mayfield trying to connect with him and it just not syncing up.
Well, he did have one really great catch right before we got on here. He's up to 4 for 73 on the day. So
nice.
Solid.
I missed that one. Fantastic.
Yeah, solid outing so far for Beckham. But, of course, yeah, Chubb is the engine of the offense, 9 for 79 on the ground, and another rushing touchdown. He's been great so far.
To me, that is, I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned the engine of the offense because in last week's game against San Francisco, now the 49ers defense all in, but especially the run defense, excellent. I think the Browns forgot to feature Chubb and make him the priority in this offense because it does seem to be the key to them winning.
Well, sometimes when, life is throwing you some curveballs, you got to ground yourself. And for the Browns, they had to ground the passing attack and rush the ball a little more with Nick Chubb. And that's been really helpful so far to them, as you mentioned. So I think that's kind of, the Browns are still figuring things out. And, I mean, they're up 20-12 right now with the Seahawks in their house. And this is a funny thing about the NFL is that, like, everything is so week to week, right?
Oh my God, is it week to week, Matt?
It's
I had
week
no
to
idea you were
week,
going there.
And I think the crazy thing too is like, it's all about like what everyone sees. So like big primetime game, the Browns come out and poop all over themselves, get destroyed by my San Francisco 49ers. And then, but the week before, they really took it to Baltimore. Like
Sure.
you mentioned the physical presence of the ground game and everything like that. And then they're obviously beating a really good team in the NFC here.
We should,
with the Seattle
we should
Seahawks.
talk about the Seahawks, though, because they did have a key injury, and that's Will Dissly.
Yes.
He went down with a lower leg injury, exited the game. There is word now that it is an Achilles injury, so you have to imagine that he is now done for the season, and this is coming off of a patella tear last year, which was his rookie effort.
Yeah, that'll be 2 years in a row. Pretty rough break for Will Dissly. And it's a rough break, too, for the Seahawks offense because you've really seen these guys, Dissly, Lockett, Metcalf, all coming together for Russell Wilson. And now it's a tough situation, especially at the tight end position, because he was one of these few guys that like kind of came out of nowhere and provided you every week stability at the tight end position. So now people are scrambling.
Well, and I would say something key to watch, Hunter Henry is making his return this week later on in the afternoon game, so we'll be able to discuss him when we're on live again during the next games at halftime. But I just looked it up, and Hunter Henry is owned, yes, in almost 60% of leagues. But if you're in one of those leagues where he is available, if 40% of leagues is kind of a lot for Hunter Henry, especially given this position, to be available in, go check that waiver wire and see if he's there, because we'll see what he does. And we obviously know his presence in the red zone is one that is beneficial, especially working behind that offensive line for Phillip Rivers.
The Chargers, too, are really in need of some more pass catchers. We know that Mike Williams has been on the injury report off and on all year. Keenan Allen's been a stud, but Dontrell Inman was there. He was back for his little return tour, and he's promptly on IR.
Austin Eckler can't catch everything.
He can, although he did last week. 15 catches on 16 targets was pretty wild. But someone brought up in the chat, DeAndre Hopkins still on lockdown in that game. I know we've had a couple of running back points to make here. Your boy Carlos Hyde having his revenge game on the team that he was on for like maybe 10 hours or something during the offseason.
And Brad Evans' boy, Duke Johnson, also finding the end zone. I have to be honest, Brad Evans during FFL said he expected both of these running backs to find the end zone. Our mics were down. I looked at Matt, rolled my eyes, and said, oh, the Duke Johnson love. And then, in fact, I heard Brad psychically yelling in celebration,
No one
despite
wants that.
being halfway across the country from each other.
Yeah, no one wants that.
Him yelling? Or
hear
psychically
hear that psychically in your own head. We hear it enough in our own ears on Sunday. I don't know, it's bringing it all
Brad
back
and
around.
I just our alignment is such that we feel a similar vibration. Take that for what it's worth.
That is good stuff. Tyreek Hill also back in this game too, 3 for 66 and a touchdown. He's been right back, and the rest of these Kansas City.
We got Tyreek Hill. I just also want to. Great point, Matt. Excellent. Also, just feel like we need to mention the fact that he is leading this receiving core in targets ahead of Travis Kelce. So there isn't any easing back in. He is back 100, so you can allay any of the fears that you may have had heading into this matchup.
And I think, too, it's worth noting he has 8 targets. No one else on the team has more than 3. So we could be seeing a situation where, it was all these Chiefs wide receivers in the absence of Tyreek Hill. The love was getting spread around to, pop in the can Byron Pringle. You got Demarcus Robinson out there. You got Mecole Hardman. Well, right now you've got Mecole Hardman with 3 for 35, caught all 3 of his targets. That's fine. Pringle has 1 for 19. And Demarcus Robinson is sitting on a 0
This
spot.
is without Sammy Watkins in the mix.
Yeah, well, Sammy Watkins, give me a break. That could be something that the answer's been all the Chiefs going forward. Now it might be just Tyreek Hill. Travis Kelce. But I'm just in terms of wide receivers. Yeah, we could be looking at a change there. Darrell Williams actually has a 51-yard catch, and then Damian Williams, I believe, has a rushing touchdoung.
On the Houston side of things, though, let's stay there because I do want to talk about Nuke Hopkins. This has been a little bit frustrating. It's interesting because in clutch moments, he is being targeted, but in those high-value, pretty stretch-the-field moments, he isn't seeing the love from Deshaun Watson. Kiki Cutie also active in this one in replacement of Kenny Stills, who is more of a field stretcher, who does have that big slot speed, but Cutie he has 4 targets. He's tied for second in team targets, and he's caught 3 for 33, so he's doing some of that work. I am very frustrated that a player as physical and reliant and efficient as Nuke Hopkins isn't seeing the pretty targets, but it is telling that he's seeing the important targets, even if those aren't translating to massive amounts of production.
The tough spot for DeAndre Hopkins is always that, he's not the guy that runs the layup routes. He's not the guy that, runs the quick slants or anything like that. He's a downfield guy, doesn't get a ton of separation. And I think that with this offense, the way it's constructed, you have a bad offensive line. They really like Kiki Cutie as a guy that is those little pop gun passes. He gets a couple easy yards, can move after the catch, all that. They don't really have anyone else other than, Duke Johnson, I guess, theoretically, that has that skill set. Kenny Stills, like you said, more of a vertical threat. So, and Will Fuller, too, by the way, 4 targets, only one catch. He's had a couple of brutal drops in this one. So you're seeing that's the swing of variance all the way from what we were at last week down to here, not as much.
Why you don't chase touchdowns, folks, too.
Yes, exactly. But speaking of touchdowns, Stefon Diggs has 2.
Here we go. Take the victory laps. Guess what? The Philadelphia Eagles secondary is beatable.
Yes, I'm pulling up a tweet right now from my colleague here, Liz Loza, who mentions just that. This week's Told You So about the Eagles secondary is even more precious than last week's victory laps over the Auden Tate touchdown.
Yeah.
It's like, everyone knows that the Cardinals stink. They're going to give up passing production, so that's why
the
Auden
Eagles,
Tate.
not the Cardinals.
Well, that's why Auden Tate's in the end zone last week. Yeah, don't worry. I got my birds straight on this one. But I think that, you're right. It's one of those things where this secondary is so bad that they are obviously providing the cure-all for Stefon Diggs, who has over 100 yards. I believe he's the first Vikings player to ever score two 50-yard touchdowns in one game. I mean, Eagles, come back to us. What the hell are you doing out there? Rasul Douglas is just watching Diggs just stroll right on by him into the end zone. I mean, this guy, he can't cover anything.
So I want to pose a couple of questions to you about Diggs, because this is an interesting player in an interesting predicament. Now, he didn't do anything last week, despite the fact that he could have and perhaps should have. It was Adam Thielen who you said during FFL was the squeaky wheel that in fact got the grease. Mm-hmm. This week we are seeing a lot of Diggs, but next week the Vikings are at Detroit. That could be some Darius Slay situation. I don't know how I feel about that. And then the week after that, they face Washington, a beatable secondary. But what is Mike Zimmer going to do against the Redskins? Establish the run. So is this a sell high moment for Diggs? And also, here's one more little thing that I was thinking. Now, the trade deadline is October 29th. If there were a player who was potentially unhappy and you preferred the other outside receiver, and really you don't need that many, and you are working out other weird receivers, is this a situation where you perhaps showcase Diggs right ahead of the trade deadline? I posed this question to Scott Pioli, former NFL executive, obviously has a ton of Lombardi trophies, on Cover 3, our show on Mondays. You should check that out.
Plug it.
And Scott said, oh, no, that never happens. You never showcase like that because a player could get hurt. You never showcase players. That just doesn't make any sense. I don't buy it.
You don't buy it.
I think that is wonderful. I appreciate and respect everything that Scott is saying, but in this situation, there's been a lot of heat, and I just feel like why are the Vikings working out these yahoos when they aren't even? I got to pull up who they most recently worked out.
Some goofballs.
Some goofballs if they aren't planning ahead, and they're not using these receivers anyway.
Yeah, I think it's a weird situation in Minnesota because you pay these 2 wide receivers, you pay your quarterback, but it is clear that Mike Zimmer and the Kubiak contingent want to establish the run, as we were saying. But when you're a Super Bowl team, which I think Minnesota believes themselves to be, and they're playing really well against another NFC contender here in Philadelphia, you need to have multiple punches. You need to have a ceiling. It's nice to be able to get to the playoffs and whatever. I mean, we've seen teams like the Bengals and the Texans be that team year after year after year that is just good enough to get to the playoffs, but then doesn't have that next level of a ceiling to take them to the Super Bowl. And I think that the Vikings want to imagine themselves to be that team, right? They imagine that they have the defense, they have the running game to be that establish the run type of team, but then they also have these 2 wide receivers that gives them access to a newfound ceiling. So I still maintain that I don't think the Vikings have a lot of incentive to trade Stefon Diggs. I mean, you see how good he can be when you do need to use him. And it's not for nothing, too, that Adam Thielen also has 6 targets on the day, tied with Stefon Diggs, and he also scored a touchdown. And he also had a near-miss touchdown, too, that if they had challenged it, might have actually been overturned. You never
So
know.
for fantasy purposes, are you advising folks to try to sell high on Diggs, despite all of this ceiling talk, despite
That's
the
more for
potential showcasing talk?
the Vikings sort of
Yeah.
situation. I think if you're a fantasy owner, sure, you can try to make that ceiling. Try to make that trade inquiry. But I think people are so frustrated with Stefon Diggs that we actually might not get a lot in return if you make that offer, and people might also just see this as a flash in the pan. But we do have a question in the chat. Of course, we are here to help you out last minute. Jose, Sutton or Calvin Ridley in this spot. We like that Falcons-Cardinals game as a potential shootout, but really good matchup for Cortland Sutton, too, against those Titans corners.
I think I'm going to lean on the volume argument here and lean towards Cortland Sutton. I predicted a get-right game for Calvin Ridley last week. I didn't get everything right at all, but that was one thing I got right, so I'm going to give myself snaps.
Yeah.
But we know Hooper's got a really good matchup. We know Sanu's got a really good matchup. So how much is going to go around? Is Ridley going to get enough, even if he has a good matchup? I think that Cortland Sutton will get fed. That is pretty much a guarantee. We've seen it week after week. So I think he's your higher floor player and the one I'm leaning towards.
I think so, too. Like I said, that those Titans corners, much smaller than a big hulking receiver like Cortland Sutton. Malcolm Brown, always among the league leaders. Boom.
You got it.
In touchdowns allowed to the players he's covering. So I think that's a pretty good spot for him. I agree with you that you go Cortland Sutton there. But we're talking about this Eagles secondary. I want to pull up their schedule here because we can look at this as like, okay, yeah, Rasul Douglas, everyone's get-right guy here. Look, they've got a pretty interesting receiver slate coming up here. They face the Vikings this week. Next week, they've got Dallas. Michael Gallup and Amari Cooper are every week starts.
Gallup
We know
game.
that.
That's a Gallup game.
That could easily be a Gallup game. The week after that, John Brown, who's been getting like #1 wide receiver volume, he's a guy that you could probably play in DFS and be really excited about it. They've got the Bears then. They've got Allen Robinson, the ghost of Anthony Miller, and Javon Wims, who they're rolling out there.
Trey Burton, yeah.
Terrific. So, I mean, this is a team that I think we really want to like prioritize in daily fantasy. Hey, get your receivers in there.
Would Mitch Trubisky be someone that you would dare to roll out, particularly in DFS, if facing? So here's my thought about
Do you think
Mitch.
he's going to be back? You think he's going to be back by then?
Well, fine, Chase Daniels would be even cheaper. But like,
A revenge game for Chase Daniel too.
there's not a no. That is a like, thank you for ever hiring.
Yeah, thanks for the cash game.
But I still, because we talk about the Eagles front line, and I just don't think that Trubisky or Daniels is grounded enough to handle that front.
Yeah, that is a good point too, because we have seen Cousins take at least one big sack on third down
that's a
in
point
this
differential
game. You know,
in fantasy.
that could easily. And look, that Bears offensive line is probably one of the most disappointing units in the NFL, not just as a run blocking unit, which we've heard Brad honk
Cody
about.
Whitehair, what are you gonna do?
What are you going to do? And that's funny with offensive line play. You know, it's a week-to-week league, Liz, as they say. And I think that offensive line play, too, like, you see some of these teams, like, just be straight disasters the entire year. Other teams that actually do have talent, and I think the Bears have a good amount of talent on the line, just suddenly start to gel out of nowhere.
Because it's not necessarily, O-lines are fascinating, even though trench talk doesn't really excite people. It's so little about talent, individual talent, and so much about cohesion and chemistry. Like you see, not this year necessarily, but the Titans going out and like going to Predators games and really building that rapport, and that's a lot of what helps build a strong offensive line.
Of course, before we get out of here, we have to check on the game of the year, Washington in Miami.
Oh, the Tank Bowl.
If you were hoping that this turned into like a sneaky shootout because these two defenses are really bad,
Hey, hope is poison.
hope is poison. 7-3, Washington has the lead. And I will say, Bill Callahan, the interim coach, man of his word, 13 carries for 85 yards for Adrian Peterson. So if you were desperate enough to play him, you're getting a good game there.
This is it. You did it.
They are establishing the run. Terry McLaurin did get loose for one catch, caught a touchdown. That guy's really good. It was a nice
No, but his
route.
separation is fantastic.
Yeah, that's the strength of his game. But on the other side of the field, there is something interesting. I know you had Mark Walton on your radar coming into this game.
I did. I actually started Mark Walton in a flex spot in a very deep league.
A very deep league.
But that's how I started Mark Walton ahead of Corey Davis, which says some stuff about Corey Davis.
Says some stuff about Corey Davis for sure. Walton has 6 for 32, 5.3 a carry, and he was out there the first two possessions before Kenyon Drake ever saw the ball. I mean, Kenyon Drake, people have been wanting it to happen for 100 years. It happened one time with Adam Gase, a little.
The month of December.
December, that is when it happened. But other than that, I mean, Walton also has 4 catches for 25 yards too. Most catches on the team, most yards on the team, most targets on the team. I mean,
the team is
not very good.
Dolphins.
The Dolphins, like, they are not just in full-on tank mode; they're also in full-on evaluation mode. They need to see who.
That is an excellent point. That is an excellent point because they demoted Kalen Ballage and then brought in Walton, who went to Miami, was drafted in the same draft class as Ballage, and went to Cincinnati. But now he's back home, a homecoming game, if you will. So I think that is a very good point that the Dolphins are evaluating things. So maybe some of these lesser established starters will have extra run as the season continues, so that they can make decisions about next year.
Yeah, they need to they need to showcase these guys for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like Ballage obviously has shown it's not a core player for you. Kenyon Drake is not a guy that they've ever relied on. He's probably not in the future plans either. Mark Walton might be a guy that they're excited about. So yeah, it's Washington. It's a good matchup, but it's tough, right? Like, you want to associate your running backs with good offenses, or maybe
You've got Todd Gurley dinged. You've got Alvin Kamara not healthy. You've got David Johnson with a never not had a good back situation.
Ain't nobody used to have a bad
back situation.
Nailed it.
Mark Walton is owned in just 4% of leagues. So if you have a deep bench or you're in a dynasty situation, maybe you stash the guy. I'm just giving you facts. You can make your own decisions based on him. But I think one of the decisions we're going to make is to get out of here now, so we can go back to watching the games and maybe eating some wings.
Sounds tempting. Definitely some football, definitely some wings. You can't get a better life than this. Liz, we're doing so well for ourselves.
We're doing pretty good. I'm going to put that hoodie on so I don't spill any of that sauce up on this shirt.
We hope you people at home are
get a
doing
bib,
well
get some
too.
beer, and enjoy the games.
Exactly. Well, we'll see you all for halftime of the late games right here. Tune back in. Bring your questions. Bring your heat in the chat room.
And use the hashtag AskFFL.
Sure. Do that as well.
Oh, and some emojis. Thank you.
Fun times.